Good afternoon. I'm Scott Brees, Executive Director of Connect Central Oregon. We're a nonprofit focused on growing the next generation of leaders. We produce and support a number of social engagement programs through a service learning model. We're proud to partner with and produce City Club of Central Oregon. Connect Central Oregon launched with the assistance of the OSU Cascades Innovation Collab, and in March 2020, we were ready to pilot our first City Club Beyond the Forum online program to expand City Club's outreach and engagement. We all know what happened next. Literally overnight, our pilot was repurposed and we successfully delivered the first fully online City Club. Proudly, Brent and Daniel, the technical team for that program, are the same team leads producing and directing today. We wanted to take a moment and recognize our partners, OSU Cascades and the Innovation Collab. Their continued support has allowed our community to continue engaging with civic programs and conversation, including over 30 candidate forums and community forums. I'm standing on the set where the 2021 OSU Cascades commencement is being pre-recorded. Over the past year, this studio set and control room have been used regularly to produce hundreds of live and edited programs. Contact us to learn more about how your community organization can engage our services at www.connectcentraloregon.org. Today, I'm also proud to announce a new partnership with Wahoo Films. Their experience and creative expertise will further expand our mutual event service offerings. We're starting with the OSU Cascades commencement, where Wahoo's team is overseeing and mentoring the Connect Central Oregon team and producing the event. Visit Wahoo Films' website to learn more about this partnership and their expanded service offerings at www.wahoo.com. Excitedly, as our region prepares to move back to allowing in-person meetings, we're working with our partners to address how best to produce events for both the in-person and online audiences. Look for more information coming directly from those organizations, including City Club, and be sure to support them with your financial and engagement support. Thank you. We now present you City Club.
Hello, City Club members, friends, guests, and community members. Welcome to the City Club of Central Oregon. My name is Blair Garland. I'm the Senior Director of Community Relations and Marketing at OSU Cascades, which is City Club's community partner and education annual sponsor. And I'm also honored to serve this year as the President of City Club's board. I'd like to take a moment to thank our other annual sponsors. Without their support, we would not be able to bring you important conversations such as this one, especially in such a challenging year. So please join me in giving a virtual round of applause to our platinum sponsors, St. Charles Health System and Brooks Resources. To our gold sponsors, ASI Wealth Management, Pacific Source Health Plans, and First Interstate Bank. To our partner in higher education and workforce development, COCC. And to our silver sponsors, Ameriprise Financial, BBT Architects, Kittleson and Associates, Miller Lumber, Mosaic Medical, the Lucier Center, and Transformation Systems International. Today's forum sponsors are Steele Associates Architects and the Schroeder Fane Group at Morgan Stanley. Here's what they had to say about their sponsorships. Steele Associates Architects has designed and donated in all of Central Oregon's counties and cities for over 25 years, and we are pleased to offer our continuing support by sponsoring this forum. Central Oregon has been persevering through the pandemic, with some facing incredible hardship and others amazing growth. And we're interested to hear what our regional managers' thoughts are on these challenges in their communities. The Schroeder Fane Group at Morgan Stanley is proud to support City Club in the annual Regional Managers Forum. As our region continues to grow, we want to continue to encourage and support the leaders who are shaping the future of this great community. Today's live stream is also made possible by our partnership with Connect Central Oregon, a nonprofit launched with the assistance of the OSU Cascades Innovation Collab. So now on to today's program. Today is our 5th annual Regional Managers Forum, featuring the city managers of Bend, LaPine, Madras, Prineville, Redmond, and Sisters. So thinking back 2 years ago, on the 3rd Thursday of May, we met at Eagle Crest and we talked about growth and its impact on housing, jobs, culture, and equitable access to economic opportunities. Last year, of course, we were under Governor Brown's Stay Home and Save Lives order, and instead we met online through YouTube. And back then we were just beginning to grapple with all the unknowns of the pandemic. The panelists that day, they talked about how COVID-19 impacted our cities and what we might expect in terms of economic recovery as cities responded to things like budget shortfalls, cancellations of long-standing signature events, and what opportunities can come about during a time of crisis. So today, city managers will discuss the issues here in Central Oregon that have been particularly impacted by a year under COVID-19, such as housing, employment, homelessness, just to name a few. We'll also hear about what stimulus money our region has received and how it is being directed. So after the first hour of discussions among the city managers, we'll hold a Q&A with the audience. And I'm sure you'll all have many questions for today's speakers. Today's moderator is Tammy Baney. Tammy is the executive director for the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. Tammy was born in Salem and raised in Deschutes County. She attended Central Oregon Community College as well as the University of Phoenix. Her professional background is in business management and real estate sales and investments. And she is honored to have been selected for her work in healthcare reform as an Oregon Statesman of the Year by the Oregon Business Association. She spent many years in the hospitality and real estate industries prior to her time on the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners. During her time in elected office, Tammy emerged as a leading voice on healthcare reform and overall health system improvement. Tammy, thank you, and I pass the microphone to you.
Excellent. Wonderful. It's great to be here today with my colleagues and friends across the region. So as noted, my name is Tammy Baney. I'll be our tour guide for today. And let's get started with where we are in terms of COVID. In the words of Salvatore Madre, resilience or hardiness is the ability to adapt to new circumstances when life presents the unpredictable. And I would have to submit that possibly a pandemic, and also having in one of the largest and fastest regions of the state and on the West Coast, a number of factors that lead into the challenges that you all might be experiencing. So as noted, roughly about a year ago, we met and we talked with the city's regional leadership to discuss the uncharted waters of the COVID pandemic. We were about 9 weeks into the stay home and save lives order from Governor Brown. And today we're again here learning, now that we've learned our new terms, such as flattening the curve and what it means to be Zooming all day. And I thought that was actually what my puppy did, but it's a little different too. So today we are here and fortunate to have this group with us to discuss how the past year has gone, lessons learned, challenges that still lie ahead for our region, and maybe most importantly, what opportunities do we see on the horizon? So I would like to welcome LaPine City Manager, Geoff Wullschalger, Madras City Administrator, Gus Burril, Prineville City Manager, Steve Forrester, Redmond City Manager, Keith Witcosky, Sister City Manager, Cory Misley, and Ben City Manager, Eric King. So Eric, I'm gonna start with you. As a manager of our our region's largest city, please give us a short overview of the past year. What has surprised you about leading through a pandemic? And what challenges has this created for local governments? And what opportunities do you see on the horizon?
Thank you for that question, Tammy. It's timely. We just were talking this morning at our executive team and kind of just taking a time out and reflecting on this past year. And I was sharing my own personal story, which I'll share with you all. You know, I think when the pandemic first hit, it was shock. And but quickly from shock, we went to creativity and some opportunity and excitement, new partnerships, new and creative ways of doing business and pivoting to new issues, which were kind of in a leadership role. I took that as something very positive. And then we had a turnover with council and doing budgeting and goal setting and just got into that. But those things in the background with the pandemic of just managing through it didn't change, right? And so we just added more and more. And then of course we had significant issues. We had social unrest, we had wildfires, we had just the continued, not only did growth continue, but it just amped up even further. And so pressure on housing, and then of course homelessness. So it just is piling up and up and up. And so as we get towards now a year in, a lot of this is, there was somebody that had coined the phrase languishing. I think we're languishing a bit right now after being a year in. And so it's time to kind of reset a little bit. as we were talking about with our team this morning, of really kind of thinking through a different mindset. Like we're all tired, we need to recharge a bit, but we have some opportunities still in front of us as we transition into this new era. And let's hold on to some of these great things that we've established with partnerships. We have funding opportunities that are upon us. And I want to kind of to bring back all that excitement that I think sort of happened right after the pandemic hit. So we're in the process of doing that, but it's not been easy. I just want to be really honest with everybody on kind of where I'm at in managing through the pandemic.
Thank you for that. And I love the really optimistic approach to it as well. So Gus, you've been with the city of Madras since around 2011, I believe. You've experienced some ups and downs during that time frame. How are things in the city of Madras?
Well, it was very disruptive, particularly the businesses that got demanded to shut down indoor activities. And so it led to our community wanting to get some funding out there and available, and we did get that initiated about this time last year, even not knowing what funds might be able to help us out or replenish what we were giving out. And we ended up doing that even through this last winter. We were helping with tents for restaurants, anything to help with indoor and heating, outdoor tents and heating, cash incentives, cash assistance, and working together with Jefferson County and Business Oregon, the Chamber of Commerce here, Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council of Strategic. We were able to give out local funds flowing through here of over $1 million. And that's a lot for our community. We were thankful for it. And I know other federal programs were able to assist as well. It was just a lot of not quite sure how long and how much and how we're going to get through that. I know our local theater almost closed and just said, we're going to throw our hands in the air, take it, banks. And the local urban renewal district stepped up and covered them for the year. And so I think we've saved a lot of things. Some no doubt have taken some significant harm, but for the most part, very proud of how our council stepped up and just got the resources flowing to try to get people, a few more months down the road to get through this thing. And so I think that spirit is still strong and momentum seems to be coming up on the other side as housing and other things continue strong. So I think we made it. I know we're not out of the woods yet, and the hospital systems have some peak numbers right now, but we seem to be coming out on the other side pretty well right now. So thanks, Tammy.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Gus. And I appreciate hearing the connection between community partners coming together to solve issues too. So thank you for highlighting that. So Steve, on to the city of Prineville. So you've been in the Crook County and Prineville community for many years, and I believe you've maybe been in your existing role since around 2009. So you've weathered some ups and downs there too. What do you see on the horizon for the city of Prineville, and what would you like to share with folks?
Well, I think between Eric and Gus, one of the quotes that you started me thinking about quotes, and one of them is Winston Churchill. A favorite of mine is his, and I'll butcher it, but when the seas get stormy, you find out who your friends are. And I relate that to what Gus was describing in his community with the different agencies, not just the city, but the county, the city, the chamber, business organizations, Annette Liba and her group with the governor's office. We all coordinated to get money to our businesses, find ways to be creative and give them a breath of life to try to bridge the gap with the loss of sales and the difficulties that many of our local businesses were struggling with. And I think at the end of the day, the whole Central Oregon community did a good job of leveraging our relationships. And what I mean by that is, I know I had conversations with Keith and Eric and all of us, and we talked in COCO, we talked in the regional administrators meeting forums on what was working, what wasn't working. And I'm very proud of what happened in Prineville. I think we were one of the earliest to get some money to our local businesses before state funds were able to kick in. And how we did that was really taking advantage and leveraging our relationships with the data center community. Especially Facebook stepped up with a significant amount of money right off the bat. And we had a good running start with our downtown committee and our chamber working together and got people money really in a couple weeks from the beginning of the lockdown. So I think those are a a good illustration of that spirit of relationship and working together and getting creative when times get tough. And I think that really identifies who we are in Central Oregon.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Steve. And there is a allocation of funds that should hit the street tomorrow, and that's a partnership between Crook County and a number of community partners as well. And so be on the lookout for that. Can be found at the COIC website. And COCO being the Central Oregon Cities Organization, I think that's an excellent highlight of how you all work well together, trying to address issues of mutual concern. So Geoff, new kid on the block. So you around November decided to take a position with the city of LaPine mid-pandemic. How has that been going for you? And what insights would you like to share?
It's definitely been a period of adjustment. Fortunately, coming from another community here in Oregon, understanding how this thing is affecting LaPine, wasn't biting off more than I could chew. I mean, the same standards applied here as did on the coast where I came from. It was basically making the adjustments midstream to where this community was at, what the expectations were, not only of your, say, everyday citizens, but the business community in particular, and making adjustments at that juncture to support them as best we could. What we've done since my arrival, I mean, it has been a very busy time. We've stepped up, or I should say reinvested in our urban renewal efforts. Our urban renewal agency was sort of put on the back burner once COVID hit, and we've gotten that going again. And we've brought back several different programs to reinvest in the community, not the least of which is our forgivable loan program, which is a way to try to attract business and keep business and generate jobs through this period. And that's been in no small part through the help with EDCO and our regional rep with the SLED board, which is the Center of LaPine Economic District. And that's been a huge assistance. And I want to tip my hat to both the SLED board and EDCO for helping us develop these programs in that time, as I stated, not just to bring jobs here, but maintain jobs. One of the elements that we focused on was, our old efforts were always on traded sector. And we've understood that, the goalposts have moved because of COVID. And so we're making adjustments now to extend those resources to non-traded sector, because we understand a big portion of our community isn't necessarily going to be working over in the industrial park, let's say. And we want to try to keep jobs as we find our way through the forest at this point in the game. Beyond that, things really have not slowed down that much, other than what I would say have been the hits to our local businesses, which we definitely don't disregard. But there's been an enormous amount of activity in our community, regardless of COVID, because of the ongoing building activity, which sort of trickles down and the money finds its way to other elements in town here and does support the businesses. So it's been, I should say, those initial efforts with economic development, and then just ramping up our capacity to process and handle the land use as quickly as it comes in the door. I mean, we're just receiving so many applications, so many subdivisions are expanding right now. And we're very fortunate to have that asset and that activity going on, because it really is sort of buoying the community or giving us buoyancy here in this really difficult time.
Great. Well, welcome, and it's great to have you as a part of the team. And keep those thoughts on housing. That question will be coming as well. But it's also great to hear you highlight the work of EDCO in our region too. I know that they've been a really important partner as we go forward. So Cory, we were fortunate to keep you in the community when you transitioned from the city of LaPine to the city of Sisters. And now that you have a little bit more time, under you in terms of your time at Sisters, what do you see on the horizon, and how has the pandemic impacted the community of Sisters?
I would agree with everything that's been said before me. Central Oregon has a strong history of partnership and coordination, collaboration in the growth that we've all seen and experienced over the past several decades. And so I think we were really well prepared for something like this, whether that's Deschutes County Emergency Management, public health, regional solutions, Central Oregon Cities Organization, things that have been mentioned prior. I think that was very fortunate for our region to have that in place, because I'm sort of at the beginning of my career, but talking with folks who are maybe towards the end of their career, they've not worked through something like this. And so we were all experiencing it in real time and learning and trying to coordinate and understand and deal with a high level of uncertainty. And we dealt with uncertainty and to some extent are still dealing with uncertainty throughout this. One thing that we really tried to do was to not be something that we aren't. So Deschutes County Public Health, they have been administering the state Oregon Health Authority restrictions. And we consciously early on said that we want to try to avoid playing politics with this thing, and we want to be as evidence-based as possible. And it's challenged and tested all of our resolve. No matter where we fall on that spectrum of agreeing or disagreeing, or it's too fast or too slow in terms of how this is being dealt with. But we really said, what can we control and how do we focus on that? And it was a lot of things around supporting businesses early on, as you heard mentioned, getting creative in allowing, parklet programs. And I think those are here to stay, which is a really cool creative outcome of something like this. And then also, trying to look at the glass half full perspective. We've been updating our comprehensive plan. And we needed to do that to address growth and change in the community prior to the pandemic, and it's only been exacerbated with the pandemic since then. But utilizing formats such as this, I think in a way we've been able to be even more accessible, more transparent to the average person, and breaking down some of those barriers that unfortunately exist with local government when. And I think maybe something like this helps people to recognize and realize how important getting involved at the local level is in things that impact their lives on a daily basis. We had a record number of committee applications in the fall. And so fortunately, we've seen a lot of people want to get engaged or re-engaged in the community. And we're going to keep, we tried to stay as productive as possible. We did a very good job of that across all of our city services and tackling big projects while also trying to manage through the pandemic. So we're keeping that going as we head into the new fiscal year come July.
Excellent. And that civic engagement is an important piece to the fabric of community, and helping you and your councils be able to plan out what it is that the community needs. And that long range planning is really critical too. So Keith, on to you. So last, to wrap up this particular question, how are things in the city of Redmond, and what insights would you like to share?
I mean, we did everything that everybody else did, just better. So everybody's covered it. So I think that, the most difficult thing through all this that we all experienced on the not so positive side is trying to figure out ways to help the businesses, right? There was fear, there was anger, there was vulnerability, there was unknown. And what we learned is that we have some really innovative business owners, small business, larger manufacturing and industrial businesses that figure out finding opportunities to get resources, but they were nimble, they adapted, and they're coming out stronger. And amidst the whole thing, again, another common theme, particularly I was listening to what Geoff was saying, and just knowing the massive residential growth going on in LaPine, a community that doesn't have a ton of infrastructure, is we've still seen permit growth across the board in 2020 that was larger than any levels in 2019, up 20%. So, and that's a consistent theme across all of these cities and communities. And I know we're going to talk about that further on in terms of how we're managing and investing in growth. But yeah, it's been a rough time, and I think everybody learned a lot.
So yes, we will bookmark the growth because it goes into the housing and then also the unhoused population and what we are experiencing there. Let's go to, and Cory, you touched on this a little bit, both on civic engagement as well as some of the adjustments that we've made to embrace a more virtual type of interaction. Are your council meetings currently virtual? And do you think that if so, will they continue virtual? Or what do you foresee things that you've maybe adapted that will go away? You noted parklets. Are those things that you think will stay, or what do you see on the horizon there for some of the ways of engagement in the future?
Yeah, I think we've had an opportunity to experiment a little bit, not necessarily by choice, but we have to evaluate those, look at the outcomes and see what the benefits are, and how do we want to continue with that or slightly amend it on a more permanent basis. Our meetings have been virtual. We're planning on shifting back to in-person next month. We're hoping to keep some kind of hybrid format in motion. We're a small city. We probably have as nice of a council chambers as Bend, but in terms of our IT budget, we aren't able to we don't have cameras in there yet. But we're looking at that, and we want to continue to understand that those are important investments to be made to get people involved and understanding what we're discussing and making decisions on for the betterment of our community. I think the parklet piece, I think that will be here to stay. How do we understand it when public events are back in full motion? Because last summer we didn't have any of our key public events. And we typically have upwards of 50 public events throughout the busy summer season. Obviously, our large citywide events are the ones people are most familiar with, but parking is a big issue with those. So how do we balance that in a more normal year when we have events and parking and those challenges back? So we're going to keep an open mind and keep thinking creatively, as was mentioned earlier. And we'll be solidifying some of those more permanently, I'd say, as we head through this summer and into fall and for years after this.
Excellent, thank you. And so a smaller community perspective, Eric, onto a bigger community perspective. What do you foresee continuing forward with civic engagement and maybe the parklets or that interaction virtually with council meetings and et cetera? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. I think we've learned a lot with public engagement. It's become actually more accessible, especially to our neighborhood system. So neighborhoods, we have 13 neighborhood associations, and they're seeing increases in participation. And they actually have a seat at the table with a lot of our land use decision-making. So I think that's something that's definitely going to be, that we're going to keep. We have growing boards and committees at the city. We've added a Human Rights and Equity Commission, a Transportation Bond Oversight Group, Environment and Climate Committee. So I think, again, those are going to be, there'll be opportunities to do those, continue those virtually. We are also looking at doing some in-person council meetings, probably starting next month in June. I think that is starting to wear a bit, that decision-making. So it's one thing to have kind of engagement with the community and it's a little more accessible, but in terms of making decisions and working through conflict, that's really difficult in a virtual setting. And I know our council is looking forward to getting back in person to do that work. I think just like Sisters, we're keeping parklets. We put that in our code. We've kept, we did some experimentation with safe parking as homelessness is a big issue, and how can we get partners in our community, nonprofits, churches, et cetera, to help to house those that are unsheltered and look creatively at solutions. And so we started that in our emergency declaration and experimented. And now we've said that's actually working pretty well. Let's put it in our code. So there's been a couple things that we've made more permanent. And then of course, teleworking, I think internally that'll for sure continue for us. We're taking a really open-minded approach of how this is going to look in the future. I think we've essentially met all of our council goals over the last 2 years. Despite the disruption with the pandemic, we permitted over 3,000 housing units, passed a transportation bond, all these pretty significant things, and we did that in a remote environment. So I see that potentially continuing, but also balanced too. We pride ourselves on collaborative problem solving, and there's only so much you can do of that virtually. So balancing that will be a trick over the next couple of months as we figure those sort of internal policies out.
Excellent, thank you. Popping by someone's doorway just to ask questions or kind of strategize about challenges is a little bit more difficult on a Zoom type of environment. So, but good to hear that some of those improvements and changes will continue. So you've all mentioned to one variation or another in terms of speaking to growth. So Gus, I'm going to turn to you and we're going to head a little bit into the housing discussion. So what are you seeing in terms of your region of rental availability and affordability? And obviously this has been a challenge that we've had in our region for many years. How are you planning for the increased demand that you likely are seeing? And then also, are you seeing an increase in the unhoused population? And if so, what efforts are underway to work with your community to address those challenges?
Okay, thanks, Tammy.
You bet.
For the last 2 to 3 years, the city has known that we need to increase investment and encourage development activity for housing needs because of the lack of available housing, rents continuing to climb because of supply demand. And so the council moved forward with a housing district that provides incentives to developers. It can be cash incentives, or it can be a combination of or combo of where maybe helping with offsite infrastructure that will serve some undeveloped land. And it seems to be working real well, because if you look at our permit numbers for our community, we were maybe 10 to 15 homes a year, and now we're starting to break over 50 a year and have more momentum right now than ever. So it is working well. Part of it is people moving around and wanting out of other areas across our country, and so Central Oregon is appealing. And it appears if the costs don't just drive people over the top, we're going to see that continued investment for this next year at least. The way everything we're seeing, new roads and infrastructure being put in, and I know Redmond have been real hot with it as well. But for us, we had to attract the builders here with some incentives, because that story of we can sell one for more profit in other parts of the region was challenging. And so we had to offset that with our incentives, and it's working well. Some of the homelessness side of this, we didn't see in COVID the numbers actually go up. I think Warm Springs opened a shelter, and some other shelters were open. So we didn't see a spike in it, but we still had demand for it. What we saw was the lack. It was interim spaces that were being borrowed by our faith-based network. And we saw a lot of those groups saying, we just can't accommodate your indoor needs. A lot of the churches said, I'm sorry, some other agencies. And so we worked with the county, the state of Oregon, on what we call the old grassland building, and got rented out there for most of the winter to have a shelter. But we're going after a shelter with the faith-based network, trying to write some grants. Seems like funding's coming in that stream, and I think Jefferson County will have its first shelter probably here in the next 12 to 18 months based upon those funding. So we're moving in that direction, and thankful we got a local nonprofit that's willing to step up and serve and fundraise. It's amazing. All of their fundraising has been local. One of our largest corporations donates to them equipment and cash dollars. It's really neat to see that local effort help those in the most need here. And so that has been interesting for me to watch and see, and it's not excited about homelessness, but it's excited to make a local effort towards it. And I know it's a growing issue for much of Oregon. Other things around that is just, I think the infrastructure demand is huge. It seems like the American Rescue Plan dollars are focused at sewer and water, but I'll tell you, transportation's not in that group of available funds. And I'm hoping if infrastructure package is coming, that it opens it up for transportation. That's the hardest thing to raise funds for. It's the most expensive thing. Roundabout anymore is 3.5 to 5 million. Well, you can build a lot of street for that money, or repave a lot of road for that money, but that type of safety enhancement is really important for capacity and safety. So, and we need a combination of those things. We hope to connect our Highway 361 Culver Highway with with Highway 9726 through town over the coming couple of years, as Love's Travel Center and multiple developments near them one wants to annex and one wants to develop next to them. So I think you'll see our south end get a little more congested, but if we can do those highway connections and off-system improvements, I think we can save some time before we back people up too bad on the highway. But we're pushing more people through the region, and I think it's just going to demand investment in all our communities on these corridors. And we really need federal assistance, but we need state programs that are responsive to growth and not, decline of gas usage and gas tax. Right? Those old mechanisms aren't keeping up. So we're hopeful innovation will continue to move across our legislature in those arenas, and that we can start to work on some safety in the region where we see a lot of accidents happening, because frankly, we're just putting a lot more pressure on the existing system. So that's Tammy, I went around a lot of stuff there. If there's more questions on that, I'm happy to answer it.
No, that's great. And the role of a city manager is so broad and complex that I can see where it easily ties into all of these pieces to the puzzle that create one picture. So thank you for that. And as an export-driven state, we need to get our region's goods to market. And so when we think about congestion and we think about the throughput of traffic, there's that component to the economic viability for our goods to get to market that's really critical to those that are placed on a state highway system. So thank you for highlighting that as well. So Cory, I'm going to move to a little bit of the housing question for you. You noted some permit activity. Do you want to maybe touch on a little bit of the unhoused? Are there things in your community that you'd want to highlight?
We've been working really closely with our partners, both at the state level, but also with the Forest Service and our new arrangement with the Deschutes Sheriff's Office in terms of law enforcement here. In Sisters, we now have a lieutenant who acts as a de facto police chief and can really be a great point of contact to be a liaison between Deschutes County Public Health, the Forest Service, the city, and work with volunteers in our community, the Sisters Homeless Networking Group, and coordinate and brainstorm about what kind of options and solutions are the right size and the right fit for Sisters. The biggest emphasis has been on connecting people to resources and understanding that we aren't a big enough community and we aren't far enough away to necessarily warrant satellite offices or resource offices here when we have Deschutes County in Bend. And so how do we understand kind of allocation of resources and just continuing to brainstorm through that and keep the conversation going. So there's still a lot more questions than answers in this arena. And I think one thing that is frustrating, but also humbling, is that you really can't point to a lot of other communities, big or small, that have, quote, figured it out or solved the issue. So again, I think this coordination, this information sharing and kind of understanding what's the right size, what's the right pace, what's the right shape for this issue in different communities. It's going to look and feel different in different communities. And so tracking the legislature as well has been a big topic and seeing what might be coming out of there in the next couple months. So that's where we're at.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey,
And
Tammy,
Geoff,
Tammy,
yes.
could I join in real quick?
Yeah, please do.
So certainly everything that has been said on particularly the housing issue and the homelessness issue is, it is a difficult problem to tackle. But I wanted to share something with the group and the participants today. Our chief of police and myself, we recognize the need for the city to coordinate and find solutions to get those services, as Cory mentioned, to those in need, provide those shelters for those in need. But one of the things that's so difficult to get our arms around is start at least working on some root cause solutions. And one of the things that we have noticed with procedural justice and all the pressures upon our public safety is people who are in need and having some struggles, we confront them, we talk to them, our public safety people do, we get them, we call the county health department, we call Best Care and other service groups to provide assistance. And we lose some effectiveness in all those transactions, right? And so one of the things we came up with is we partnered with Best Care, and we took one of our police officers and kind of created a new position whereby instead of having two police officers in a car at the same time, we have a certified police officer and a certified Best Care person to provide these pathways to the service. So, from a mental health perspective, from a medical perspective, as it relates to making sure that the help medically is being administered and being followed up with. And we've had some really great success. And we have a couple of people in our community that would fall in and out of functioning fairly effectively and then have some issues come up and lose some of those service capabilities and go the other direction. And we've seen some very significant success. And what we're hopeful for is we can't take our foot off the gas of providing these capacities of service that are so needed, especially talking about mental health issues and homelessness. But I think there's some root cause opportunities, and we're very hopeful that this is a trend that will get legs. And I know other communities are looking at, and probably Eric's always 2 steps ahead of me as well as Keith, but I think those are the type of things that have come out and have been highlighted as we've worked through COVID. These things have become even more and more critical. And I do see some movement where we're making some progress and getting innovative and having some success. I think it's important to note that.
Well, Steve, those are really critical points to note. And, you know, I've often said that no one wakes up on a Thursday and hopes that they'll find themselves without employment or maybe with a medical crisis or being unhoused. And so being able to meet those community members where they are and provide the services to help them get to that next space is really an important factor into their success, but an important piece that people often miss happens to land on the city oftentimes, and particularly at law enforcement levels too. So thank you for highlighting what seems to be working in your community, and I thank you for that investment too. So Keith, I'm going to pivot to you really quickly on the housing question. So last year we had just passed the House bill that was able to, House Bill 2336, I believe it was, with Representative Zika, and opportunity for affordable housing in Redmond. How's that project going, and what insights would you want to share?
Actually, I will answer that, but Steve's point is a good one in that it shows how, like, you've got the advantage of scale, right, Steve, being such a small community, right? And exactly what you said in terms of how you deal with it and how you help these people get the assistance they needed. And it will work in a place like Prineville and some of the other communities where it's grown to a situation where in Redmond, but certainly in Bend, where it's much harder now to manage it, to nobody's fault. What you asked me, my favorite color? So yes.
Yes, your favorite color, and then we were going to talk about House Bill 2336.
Okay, so, gee, what's more interesting? The so 2336, basically that was where Representative Zika helped us create an opportunity to work with the county to bring in 40 acres of county-owned land and donate it to us so we can build a new neighborhood of nearly 500 units. So we're going through all the exciting land use processes right now, but I think the takeaway for those that are still watching is we're trying to build at least half, possibly 2/3 to 3/4 of those to be affordable, affordable in a way that, for the people that are nurses or teachers or, jobs somewhat on either side of that spectrum, can live. Because, right, you look at the latest numbers, who's got 600 and whatever it is, $20,000 to buy a house in Bend or 400 and something in Redmond, knowing that it's a region where the wages just are not matching up with what home builders can get for their homes. So we're hoping with this new neighborhood that's going to be a few years away that we can, and it's something that we control. The city owns the land, right? So we can think about new models of housing type and really trying to push the limits and working with your group and Cascade East Transit to bring transit there and make a bit of a dent in the affordable housing market that's so badly needed.
Thank you for that. And thank you for teeing me up on a transportation question, which is next. And so last year we were also talking about the possibility of a transportation funding package in the city of Bend. Eric, what do you, congratulations. The community was supportive in making that investment with the city of Bend. And so what do you see on the horizon there? And what should we be looking forward to in the future?
Well, and I have to say thanks to you, Tammy. I think it was our City Club forum that we did last February, right before the pandemic. I don't know, for some reason, Ben Broadband keeps looping that thing, and I keep seeing myself on TV over and over and over again. And you are way better, by the way, than I am. That is not my favorite thing to do. But yeah, no, I'm super excited that the community supports investment in infrastructure and that that we're moving forward. We just had our first oversight committee meeting yesterday or 2 days ago, and it's going to be a 10-year build out and a lot of what I kind of call smart growth initiatives of really connecting Bend, making it work better, but being sure that we don't create undue, these safety problems and creating all these roads that then just destroy our livability. How do we preserve our character, build infrastructure that's right-sized, but gets things moving. We've got log jams in the system that need to be corrected. And I think we took a pretty strategic approach and also tried to balance some affordability. We did a lot of testing about what the community would tolerate, and took a very sort of research data-driven approach in developing that list, and really and a strong backing of our community groups that developed our transportation system. And it took us 2 years to do that, but that was that foundation. I think that's the lessons that we're learning is because there's such divergent views around growth, and then infrastructure becomes a lightning rod for how people think about investment in infrastructure, that I think we've moved past it, but a lot of that, well, if I invest in this infrastructure, that means more people are coming here. Well, they're going to come here anyways, and we can't stop them. That's how Oregon land use works. We have to just plan for growth, and we all need to do our part in investing in this system. And we're all challenged a bit with having this sort of weird tax system in Oregon that just doesn't allow for us to use our tax rate for infrastructure. And as Gus was mentioning, transportation is not like a utility. It doesn't have a steady stream. So it's always this, paperclip duct tape approach where we're applying for grants or this or that. So I'm thankful that we've got something other than just relying on growth through SDCs to pay for transportation with this bond ahead of us.
Excellent. Well, and maybe we should take up a collection for those that would like us to drop off the Ben broadband channel, and we'll end up getting a little bit of extra.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's an important investment because, as you noted, the growth is going to happen. And Geoff, you had mentioned some activity that was happening in LaPine in terms of growth in the housing market. How is that flowing over into the transportation needs for your community? And are there insights you'd want to share there?
Absolutely. So really exciting period in our very short history, being that we are now the youngest city in the state of Oregon. We passed an SDC, street SDC program back in the fall prior to my arrival. And that program's been in existence in less than a year. And while it's not specifically about dollar amounts, we're very excited in our budget projections this year to see that just in about 9 months we've already generated $450,000 in a very short period of time, which for a city the size of LaPine is a sizable amount of money. We're also in an interesting position when it comes to speaking of road infrastructure, because given our relatively young age at this point, a lot of the roads do not belong to the city, as I'm sure you know with your time with the county. And there will come a point in time, I know the discussion's been had many times prior, as to when is the city going to potentially take on that responsibility. And we're trying to get there. And as you said, the sort of paperclip approach, we're trying to get creative because we need to expand our infrastructure to support the enormous housing increase that we're experiencing right now. And I can speak to that. I was asked recently, do I have a good estimate as to what we might see by the end of the year? Right now, I think conservatively, I can say by December 31st, we're going to see about, from this date forward, about 180 to 190 new units here in LaPine. They're literally going up daily, and we have applications for new subdivisions weekly. So it's just an enormous growth rate. We're very excited about it, obviously, because it's going to help the city expand, but we're also in an interesting position, which I know you're all aware of, in that the limits of the size of the city, our city limits are pretty small at this time. And we find ourselves in a position where there's LaPine and then there's LaPine. And the question is always out there, when is LaPine going to take over the rest of LaPine? And I'm not going to put an answer out on that yet. I'm not going to hang myself. I haven't been here a year yet, so give me a little time, but it is in the back of our minds. We are also very excited that we are finally going to be putting down some roots on a huge infrastructure expansion project with water and wastewater. The original number was around 25 million. I would say, given where things are at right now, we're probably looking more realistically at around 32 to 33 million. But we're going to bid on that in September. And what's exciting about that is there are portions within the city limits right now that have traditionally been underserved with water and wastewater that are now going to be connected. So, I know it's sort of an all-encompassing answer, Tammy, but to say that things are happening quickly here is an understatement. And there's going to be no slowdown in the housing. Not only are we seeing applications just increase on a weekly basis, but we actually have a number of contractors that specialize in housing, or house building, if you will, that are moving to the area to make this their base of operations from other areas in the state. And I think that's reflective of the affordability of LaPine at this time. with a huge asterisk on at this time.
Well, thank you for highlighting that. And Geoff, one of the things that it's been a joy to watch is the growth of LaPine in terms of retaining that uniqueness that Cory talked about, making sure that COVID doesn't change who you are as a community and as a city. But to watch LaPine, the beautification that has been, through the Main Street area and the businesses, you can see it. You can see it in Prineville, Sisters, Madras, all of the communities. And smaller communities, it's difficult because you don't have that funding to be able to make those investments. And so kudos to you and your team for getting a lot of that done. So pivoting now over to Keith again, who hasn't shared with us his favorite color, but I'm sure that he will. City of Redmond has within its boundaries one of our greatest assets, and that is the Redmond Airport out at Roberts Field. So what activity is happening at Roberts Field, and how has COVID impacted maybe last year, and what do you see on the horizon for Roberts Field and the airport?
Yeah, so the activities, right, are planes taking off and landing. And what we're seeing, though, it's been interesting, right? The trough, right, was anywhere from a 20 to 25% activity level in terms of passengers. And more recently, in the last few weeks, it's reached levels of 70, 80, 90%, and in some cases even exceeding what we had a couple of years ago. So we're seeing the growth come back. When you talk to any of the tourism experts, people like Kevney at Visit Bend, we're still looking at a couple of years away from having commercial air service come back to normal across the country. We did not feel the impacts the same as many of the other airports, Portland, et cetera. And in fact, we even added a service May 13th, the Velo Airlines, which was some of the folks that started Allegiant. They fly out of Burbank and they try to fly into airports where it's just an easier experience because it's a smaller airport feel. So they picked Redmond. So now we've got direct flights to Burbank on a 737 on a real live airplane. So the airport's coming back around. The CARES money and the ARP money has been extremely important. We've gotten around 12 million, give or take, in all of the airport relief funds, and we're seeing growth that in terms of the well, not to get like too technical, but like the fixed base operators, which are the folks that fix planes and fuel planes, and they're making a major investment, $6-7 million investment in a hangar in the north side. So we're continuing to make the investments, and we're just beginning to look at the design work, working with stakeholders on a new terminal. So somewhere in the next few years, there'll be a second story on that terminal where you'll go in one of those skyways to get on the plane. And, that'll be another $20 to $25 million project. So things are going well. The federal money has helped enormously, and we're coming out of it.
Excellent, thank you. And I do understand those new $19 flights, you actually get to fly inside the plane, which is for $19. I figured maybe duct tape on a wing. So it's
not a pressurized cabin, though. So that's
well,
the only
the
twist.
There's the savings. So
yeah.
I'm going to take this next question to both Steve and to Gus. So I'm going to start with Steve first. A lot of talk right now about the onset of drought, whether we're in it now or soon to be across the region. And then also the conversation of not just the water, but also what does that mean in terms of communities? And I know they're not entirely connected, but the wildfire concerns that we might also be experiencing within our communities. So two topics, drought and wildfire preparedness. Steve.
Yeah, so I think this is another example of getting outside the box and thinking. So as the drought relates to municipal water, we're all working together, every single city, every single county. We talk about this a lot. Eric's been a great facilitator, and thank you, Eric, for pulling together a consortium to address how we fulfill the water capacity needs for municipalities. That's one issue. The other issue, obviously, is our agricultural community. And this situation we find ourselves in, I've been around long enough. I am a farmer, and we've seen this happen a couple times before in my lifetime. It's very unnerving, and there's a certain amount of additional uncertainty with the climate change equation that, again, is uncertain. We don't know what it is. We know it's real. We don't know what that means in terms of the cycle we find ourselves in now. So all the agencies, the 8 irrigation districts in Central Oregon, are all working together. We're working together. I'm working with the farmers down the road to come up with a solution to keep some viability into our operations. But again, I think we need to look back to how do we fix it going forward, and how do we prepare ourselves for less water in the future. And again, I see a great amount of coordination with projects, the PL 566 money. There's piping projects. I know they're controversial, but they do save water. They also add water back into the environment to increase flow capacities and help out with species, ESA species or any species in general. And that's the right thing to do. The trick is to find that balance. And I think we're heading in that direction. A couple quick words on the wildfire threat. I think we need to be very, very sensitive to that. We saw what happened in California. There's a connection to our power grid. We've got big power transmission lines running through our communities. We have big users, certainly in Crook County, but again, back to the point of how fast our region's growing. It's all critical infrastructure, and there's a certain amount of risk associated with wildfire. One of the things, again, I think that we have to look at, kind of going back to my root cause strategy for some of the issues our Central Oregon region's facing. This is another one. And one of the things that our community has been working on, and quite frankly, I got in the middle of what happened with the project, the biomass project in LaPine, and we kind of started working with some of the people that were involved in that. Central Oregon, in my opinion, is very, very strategic to that potential. It's not cheap energy, folks. It's just not. But what it is an opportunity to put together a supply and a foundation for biomass that is specific to urban wood waste, to residuals coming out of operations, which if you're in the forest products business right now, you're a happy camper. But my point would be, that's where the foundation needs to be built, is build that supply on reducing urban wood waste, and then tie that into stewardships. At the end of the day, the root cause, part of the root cause, and I believe part of the solution, so does my council and so does my community, is treating the forest. We've got way too much under storage, too much fuel load on the forest floor. Our forests are not healthy, in my opinion, and I think there's others that would agree. We have to find a way to address that. And we can't just go out and start taking material out of the forest. We have to do it strategically and in an environmentally correct way. And I think our region is so perfect for that in so many ways, where we have big users of the tech industries here, big users of electricity. We've got big power lines that we can offload and onload to. We have a rail, the Oregon Trunk running through our communities. With City of Prineville has a railroad. We have a lot of ingredients to be successful. And certainly if Lakeview can do it and find a way to help manage the forest most effectively. And in essence, really what that means is duplicating to the best of our abilities what Mother Nature used to do, pre-European. And that's what we really need to look at. That's a solution that I think's within our grasp, and we need to actively go after that. So that's what we're doing in Prineville, is we're pushing the biomass. We have a great grant to put together what I'm characterizing as an investment grade portfolio for a project. I've spoken with Sally Russell, and Sally, I think, is a advocate for that type of thinking and the potential thereof. So we're hopeful that Central Oregon can lead the way in finding a forest management tool that makes sense for everybody.
Well, and Steve, thank you for highlighting. Sometimes introducing smoke into the community is not something that people are favorable of. However, it will happen. So would you prefer that you get to manage and direct that, or have it directed for you by a wildfire? So thank you for noting those important pieces too. Gus, how about to you, both on the drought question as well as wildfire preparedness?
Okay, thanks, Tammy. Yeah, it's wife and I moved here in 2005, and we've been, over the years, this is the lowest year of what we could order for Deschutes River water right. We're usually get allocated 2 feet. Last year was 1.25 feet, is the second worst year. This year's 1 foot, or 50% availability. And I know that's not as bad as the Klamath Basin, but you know, for somebody in the middle of their mortgage trying to run a farm and you only have half your water, it is a dire situation. Folks can't all switch over to crops that are like our carrot seed. You have to coordinate with your neighbors on that. It's a high cost up front, and you have a lot of risk if you lose the crop. So not everybody can just go to a different crop. And so it's not an easy transition. And so you'll see a lot of fallow ground. And so when that translates to, you know, the drought and wildfire, we have more dry ground than we usually had. A lot of irrigated ground here was a lot of buffer to the communities, and that's not the case anymore. And so we're working more closely with our fire district. They do have a fuel reduction program for individual homeowners for around their structures and homes. We encourage folks to take advantage of that, do a consult, and they can get granted to reduce some of the things that might be most dangerous to their structures. And we want to work with our fire department on our fringes. The city owns a lot of land out that's basically rangeland and dry land out to the east side of town. Want to take a look at what fuel reduction, loading, and buffer zone we can set up for safety for that side of town, and work with our private landowners on the other dry sides. And so we'll continue to work at that. We're in the middle of updating our natural hazards mitigation plan with the county and for our community, and just we are focused and concerned about those things. Steve mentioned and highlighted on the habitat conservation plan, and I know the Deschutes water basin, the group of folks are trying to figure out where to focus energies. A lot of the city of Madras has 200 or 300 acres of Deschutes water right. We used to literally get our drinking water from that water right. Now we irrigate grounds here and work with the Deschutes Valley water because it's a little bit less treatment needed to drink it, better drinking water. But we still have that water right that's utilized by North Unit and delivered to us for green areas, farms, and different things that we irrigate, green spaces here in the city. And so it is a big issue for us. And so anything we can do to work with our neighboring communities on those things that reduce loss of water between one spot to another, or if we need to regionally plan for alternate storage locations, so we're not pushing as much through evaporation or into the ground loss between one space to another. I think those are things we'll have to collaborate on, and at a state and federal level, but at a local level, so we can be more efficient with the water that is given to our region. And we're being forced in that direction with the droughts. So we really do, as a community, as a county, really do need the collaboration and help to be able to hold on and still have some of that water that we're frankly losing in a lot of different ways that we just need to work on. So those are different things. Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah, thank you, Gus. And I appreciate you using the example of your own experience, because I think that helps to put it into perspective. Often it's just numbers, but unless you're living it, you can't really understand the magnitude of what we're experiencing. So thank you for that. So we have a number of questions that have been presented ahead of time that we'll roll through here in just a moment. And some are being populated behind the scenes right now with Executive Director Joey. So last question to you. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want our viewers to know before we get into the questions from the viewers? And if not, that's just fine too. But if there was something in particular that you wanted to be able to mention to the group.
I'll mention something, Tammy.
Great. Yeah.
So I think one of the things I think people maybe lose sight of is, and we touched on it just now, is how much our Central Oregon community has been working to develop creative, innovative, environmentally sensitive solutions to water and wastewater. And certainly one of the things I think that might surprise people about Prineville, given our propensity to be conservative over here, we have some very successful solutions for our wastewater in a wetland that's been nationally recognized, and we have an aquifer storage and recharge, and it's both very effective from a fiscal standpoint in terms of utility rates, in terms of SDC rates. And more importantly than that, it's environmentally very, very effective in terms of, for example, our wetland returns clean, cold water into the Crooked River, and we don't go through a mechanical plant. And the aquifer storage and recharge gives us the ability to store water during low water times or high water times to be used during low water times, such as a drought. And one of the things I see happening is we had Keith's team over yesterday and toured our wetlands. And we're very, very happy to share that information. I know down in LaPine, we've had conversations, and we're all working with Anderson Perry in one way or the other. So we have some engineering in common. And, you know, Gus and I have had conversations. We've all had conversations. And I think people need to know that all our communities are doing some great environmental work. And I've even came up with a tagline that I call him Dr. Klon, our city engineer, came up with. And I think it fits all of us. And what it means as it comes to infrastructure is creating a better tomorrow through fiscally responsible projects benefiting the environment and the community. And I think that is a great way to summarize some of the work that we're all doing.
And that is so true, Steve. And what you're also highlighting is many people might come from outside the area where their local governments do not work well together. And I think throughout this entire conversation so far today, we've really been able to underscore the intentional efforts that are happening as local leaders in bringing each other together to learn and to leverage your intellectual and maybe even financial resources. So thank you for that.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to have the first question. This one is in reference to older adults. And Cory, I'm going to send this one to you. I know that you have a lot going on with age-friendly sisters, and we also have the Sister Shopper. Maybe I just answered the question for you, but older adults outnumber children under age of 18 in Central Oregon. With older adults at over 20% of Central Oregon's population and growing, what resources are being put towards their livability?
Great question. So I think one of the beautiful things about Age-Friendly Sisters Country and the approach that nonprofit is taking here in our community and how we're trying to partner and support their mission is that, you know, infrastructure projects, things that are good for an 85-year-old are also good for a 5-year-old. So it's not a senior focused group. It's a group that's focused on accessibility and mobility and livability and safety. You know, we did a public safety survey back in the fall of 2019 when we were working on renegotiating the law enforcement contract with the sheriff's office. And overwhelmingly, the biggest public threat that was identified here was traffic safety. So, you know, we heard that people feel very safe in Sisters, but they're concerned about traffic and the growth and the increase in traffic. And so we've been doing a traffic safety audit and really understanding how can we improve key intersections, how can we invest in traffic mitigation measures, safety measures, and really emphasizing bike and ped infrastructure and facilities. How do we enhance that here for, you know, the older population, but everyone, you know, whether that's families moving in and wanting to walk their kids to school or whatnot. So that is a high priority for us and something that we're going to continue to keep top of mind as we move forward.
Excellent, thank you. So Geoff, next question for you, and it's related to tourism. What are you expecting for the summer tourist season? And I did note, I believe that LaPine Frontier Days is on, which also is code for possibly the lawnmower races. Do you want to fill us in?
Well, you know, given the, shall we say, developing landscape right now, we have been taking the position pretty much since the start of the year that if somebody was going to supply an application for an event, we were going to go ahead and process it and presume that things were going to get better, with at the same time putting the onus upon the event provider that, you know, understanding that the situation could change. But we are very aware, especially with our very active Chamber of Commerce that we have here, that the people are ready to come to LaPine. I know that Frontier Days, I've never experienced it personally, but coming from a community where, you know, shall we say, a community-centric event like that drags in people from all over the area, even out of state. In Garibaldi days when I was on the coast, I know how big an event this is, and especially with regards to the rodeo being right across the road from it. So we've just been preparing and essentially pretending as if things were normal, with keeping the rose-tinted lenses on, that, you know, knowing that things aren't normal, and making sure that the providers and the event organizers are aware that the circumstances aren't necessarily static at this time, but supporting them as best we can in preparation for that. Our businesses obviously desperately need the foot traffic, as do all of our economies and our local communities. So we're just preparing as best we can and supporting them in being ready for the shall we say, the waves are going to come up and down 97.
Yes, well, and the richness of those community events really celebrates the uniqueness of each one of your cities. So it's exciting to hear that some of those events are coming back. So the next question I am going to send to Eric, and that has to do with House Bill 2001, the missing middle. And do you want to comment on how that is being embraced at the City of Bend?
Sure. Well, first off, I think it's important to note that House Bill 2001 applies to cities over 25,000 in population. So I think Redmond was right up the cusp, but so it might just be a Bend Redmond issue, but it was the legislature saying we need to do more to create housing opportunities for our teachers and firefighters and kind of the folks that are really in need of what we call kind of workforce housing. And going back to the past a bit. I can look out my window here at City Hall and there's a historic neighborhood that has $2 million houses, and a block away, there's rental housing that's walk-up units that it all works really well together. And I think we've gotten away from that over the years in the sort of planning world, and we wanted to isolate folks. And there's opportunities to kind of really create more housing options in our neighborhoods, but do it in a thoughtful way. And so that's what 2001 is really trying to capture, of kind of looking differently at just single family zones and coming up with more creative options. I think we've all dabbled in the ADU realm. So that's accessory dwelling units. So it's kind of that next level of looking at duplexes, triplexes, cottage homes, really trying to remove barriers like parking, setbacks, just getting to kind of past that sort of production of just the single family home, subdivision palette, and having just more variety. And so we're just wrapping up that work. It's not without some controversy. I think there's a lot of concern with parking in particular. And so we're working through those issues. It'll come to the Planning Commission this summer and council shortly thereafter.
Excellent, thank you. And so Keith, I'm going to send the next question to you, which is a little bit about growth and a little bit about controversy. How can we best address the needs of growth in a way that is inclusive of those who have lived in the area for a long time versus newcomers who may want the same amenities they had previously?
Yeah, I mean, managing growth, managing quality of life in an area like Central Oregon that is so popular, right? Then you've got the additional layer where when people that move here, as soon as they get here, regardless of maybe how many forests were torn down to build their home, want the gates closed behind them. So you've got different layers of people with different expectations. And you do have to figure out a way to help the folks that have been here a long time understand the balance between the growth and the density coming and what cities are doing to try and kind of enhance the quality of life, right? So in Redmond, we're getting 4 people a day moving here. You're getting more comments in our online surveys about speeding and neighborhood safety. And so, as we make investments in new parks and think about adding amenities to maybe something that might have just been kind of a raw open space into things that work across the generations, right? So if you build a new modern playground, there's a chance for, littler kids and grandparents and others, and helping people see that the growth will bring change, but with the change, that there can be a lot of positive outcomes, and that yesterday was just that, right? It was yesterday, and it's never going to be tomorrow. But it might mean that there's more restaurants than just a couple restaurants in town, right? I mean, this is something that I'm not obsessed with LaPine, but I mean, Geoff is going to be facing this. He talks about the number of housing units that are going to be built by December. And I've had conversations with what will likely be the next county administrator, Nick Lilac, about the growth in LaPine and how you balance the transformation of all of our kind of communities from the past to the present to then the future. It requires a lot of communication by the cities, and descriptions of how we're improving things and how we're accommodating the growth and the benefits that come from it.
That's great. Good answer. That's never been an easy one. So I'm going to take the next one to Gus. The cities in the region will be receiving significant funding to address COVID-related challenges. What do you see those funds being spent on, and have you identified how those dollars may be invested?
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. We've just looking at the Treasury guidance that came out there about a week ago. It looks like, you know, those that public health for sure. So our county public health departments are going to, and anything related to support them are going to have help. Addressing negative impacts. So business grants that have been, you know, your restaurants, gyms, salons, anybody that's been impacted, you could either replenish your funds to get ready for something we can't foresee coming, or put more of those out. Serving hardest hit communities. So homelessness is very much supported use in those funds. Replacing lost public sector service revenue. We were going to do some, you know, 3 to 4% sewer water rates to keep up with inflation, replacing old infrastructure. We didn't do that during COVID. So there's a provision in there that would grant you to be able to capture some of that you lost. And then the investment, in the critical infrastructure, they noted water, sewer, and then stormwater is in there, and then broadband infrastructure. So those are areas that can be focused on. And then public safety, there was a caveat that it needed to be very COVID related, not quite as broad as some of the money that came out a year ago. So those are the areas we're looking at. For us, you know, we have a joint project with Jefferson County on Willow Creek. We have a bunch of the downtown core of town sitting in a floodplain. So about every 10 to 20 years, we get a pretty good flood that messes a lot with the community through there. That is a possibility for us. We talked about the Jefferson County's first homeless shelter, homeless service center. So we're looking at that. I think we'd want to replenish some of our business grants that we gave out so we could be ready to go if we need to do it again later this year. We'll look at public safety for sure. And so I think those are the areas we are focusing right now and want to try to be ready, and trying to do it in a way that as the state legislature tries to, they want to leverage our funds with their funds, I think, in the allocations. We're trying to figure out how to do that, to what scale, make these things scalable. And so any insight we can do with that, we've communicated out to our state reps and senators and said, here's kind of where we would focus. So we'll see how this returns and connects. It's a little bit convoluted, not sure how much to ask for or what areas they want to focus on. So that's kind of the current dance, I guess you will, or trying to figure it out that we're working through with the state. So that's where we're at right now, Tammy.
Well, and it definitely is a dance. That's a good word, good descriptor. And so just for the general viewers, we will be having a meeting with all of our regional administrators talking about some of these investments, and just, if nothing else, just sharing ideas and investment needs, and then also talking about what infrastructure package needs there might be. We, you know, most except Prineville share Highway 97, important freight corridor and important to all of our economy and our livability in our communities. And so how we together as a region will be addressing some of those investment needs and opportunities. So next question is, it's geared toward Bend, but I would say that most of your cities have experienced an increase in engagement around social justice, and which has brought forward an increase in some social justice events and even some protests. And so has this impacted your budget? Would maybe be a question that's one question that's been thrown out. But Eric, you also mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that you are undergoing with your team. So do you maybe want to capture that into a body of work there of what you've been seeing, and then some of the ways in which you are addressing some of the challenges? Yeah,
you know, I think for Bend, we started, I would say, a more intentional journey on diversity, equity, and inclusion about 4 years ago with council goal setting process. We go through a pretty intense goal setting, and we at that time did some items to focus internally on our organization as well as externally. So we created a task force to really help us think about what does really embedding DEI into not just as a project, but really embedding it into the culture of the city and the community. You know, we've declared ourselves a welcoming city, but let's live up to that and let's create action and accountability around those items. So that short-term task force helped recommend a Human Rights and Equity Commission, which council has approved. They are now formed. They've had their first meeting here a few weeks ago. So that's externally, and we're still formulating that work plan. And internally, we've established a DEI, and accessibility has been important. That's been mentioned as well. I think we've had a long history here in Bend around improving accessibility for all users of our system in many ways. And so when we talk about DEI, it's really about bringing everybody along. And there are folks in our community that have been left behind. And I think this pandemic and the resulting economic devastation has really exposed that. And we always talk about that K-shaped recovery of our most vulnerable are seeing things get worse. And I think there's some desire to correct that at all levels of government. And we are putting that front and center in how we're distributing the ARPA funds, how we are looking at our own sort of policies and decision-making. In fact, we're trying to collaborate with our partners in the school district, parks, and library, thanks to COIC helping to create space for that called Collective Impact Bend. And we've prioritized DEI as an item that we all want to tackle. And so one of the first pieces that we're addressing is this idea of equity mapping, of understanding our community better, and not just demographic data, but where are pockets of poverty, where are underserved communities. We just had a conversation with our public health partners at the county of where are we seeing poor health outcomes? How can we take all that data and learn from it and make some better decisions about where we deploy resources, how we do outreach, and just, I think we are moving so fast as we're growing. We have to it's again, another little timeout, like what we were doing isn't quite working. And we should all be a little bit more conscious of bringing everybody along. And so I think this is just good. It's good business practice, no matter public, private, we all need to be doing that. So we've got work to do for sure, but we've put some infrastructure in place to get us there.
Love it. And, again, I guess it's another highlight of the collaborative efforts that are happening behind the scenes to pool our resources. And you were right, when we have investments to be made, if we are not being strategic about those investments, then we may not be allocating the funds in the right areas and not even recognize that. So thank you for that. The next question I'm going to kick to Geoff, and it's a question about your tax base, but I suspect it has to do with the budget. But how and to what extent have changes brought about by COVID impacted your city's tax base? And maybe you could take that a few ways. One could be the growth. Two could be maybe spending dollars on things that you maybe had not intended. But wherever you'd like to take that question, Geoff, it's yours.
Well, I will say initially, obviously being in budget season, we're forecasting what we think our take is going to be and what we think we're going to end up at the end of the year. At this point, we've seen little impact in terms of the actual take. I mean, to the contrary, things are static and above average. COVID has definitely had impacts, but as far as the submitted tax revenue, we're doing quite well. We did adjust prior to my arrival. My predecessor adjusted for expectations of reductions in revenue in terms of utility revenues. And I'd done the same thing on the coast where I came from. I think we had probably all made some adjustments forecasting for that circumstance because we didn't know what people were going to be able to afford. But to the heart of your question, the tax base really has not been impacted that much, quite the contrary. And I think I've said this several times in the conversation today that things are looking quite rosy for us in terms of that property tax revenue going up. We're in a very advantageous position. We don't take it for granted. We are trying to determine, how we're going to best use that as we grow in the future. There's a number of initiatives, shall we say, here in the community that are knocking on our door, and we're considering those. And while I'm not going to go into great detail at this point, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to consider as we define who we're going to become over the next decade. And I'm proud to say that while we've sort of, adjusted to this influx of building applications and very quick growth, I have basically gotten the planning commission and the council on board with this concept of we really need to define who we're going to be. There's where we've been. I think a better metaphor for it is we're 16 years old and we want to figure out what we're going to be when we grow up. And so through that process, we're sitting down and we're not going to do a full comprehensive plan assessment and review, but we're going to essentially go back to our roots and look at our goals and look at our priorities and our policies and make some determinations. And as far as where that property tax revenue goes in the future, I think in large part is going to be directed by what comes from those discussions that we're going to have with a third-party planner who's well known throughout the state. Morgan CPS is going to be helping us through that process. So we're very excited to have John Morgan come on board and steer us as to the next, shall we say, destination for LaPine with our tax revenue and how we're going to use it.
John is one of the wisest individuals that I know, so that'll be great having him in the community. So we have come to the end of our time together. I just really want to say thank you to each one of you. It has been a pleasure getting to know each of you through the work, but also just getting to know you personally. Our region is in good hands, and I think that was highlighted with each of your comments, but also how you work well together. And again, it shouldn't go unsaid how unique that is, that this type of collaborative environment is not exactly how it looks all across the state. And so that intention that you each put into those relationships is we are all better for it as community members. So thank you for those that investment of time. And so I'd like to just take a quick moment and ask everyone to say thank you to Geoff Wullschalger, to Gus Burril, to Steve Forrester, Eric King, Cory Misley, Keith Witcosky for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us. And thank you to Steele Associates Architects and Schroeder Fane Group at Morgan Stanley for sponsoring today's program. Remember, if you enjoyed today's forum and you would like to help City Club, please consider becoming a member or live stream sponsor at cityclubco.org. Definitely do that. Next month's forum is about a much discussed issue being considered by Bend City Council. Should we remove parking space requirements for new construction of houses, apartments, and businesses? Woo, and the crowd goes wild. Talk about controversy. That'll be a good one. Advocates say this could help with our current housing crisis and make Bend more sustainable. Opponents argue this will lead to more parking problems in the city. You'll have to tune in to check that out. Next month's forum moderator will be Brenna Visser, reporter with the Bend Bulletin. Speakers will be Melanie Keebler, Bend City Councilor, and Eric Jaffe, editorial director of Sidewalk Labs. To hear more about this, please be here next month. Our June forum is at noon on the 17th. Thank you for watching, and please continue to cultivate conversation about issues that connect us all to build a strong community. And I think at this point, I'm to turn it back maybe to Scott with a closing video or a lifeline of sorts.
All right, I'll find a video.
Oh, good. Okay, what's your favorite color?
Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I followed the script. I hope that's these are those awkward moments.
This is good.
This is
I think
good.
Keith's favorite color is earth tones.
Really? I heard Bend is closing all of the streets downtown, not just the parking. That's what I've heard.